When Donald Trump visits the U.S. Naval Academy in Maryland, what starts as a routine presidential appearance turns into an unexpectedly emotional moment that no one, not even Trump himself, could have predicted. Surrounded by young cadets who've dedicated their lives to service, Trump faces a deeply human moment that strips away politics and power. A single act of humility bridges the gap between commander and soldier, reminding everyone that beneath titles and uniforms lies one shared duty: love for country. No one expected Donald Trump to do what he did that day. The cadets stood in perfect silence, waiting. Cameras flashed, whispers spread. But when Trump suddenly broke protocol and did something no president had ever done inside those walls, even the toughest officers had tears in their eyes. The wind from the helicopter blades whipped across the parade grounds of the U.S. Naval Academy, scattering leaves and tugging at the flags lining the field. Hundreds of cadets stood in perfect formation, their white uniforms gleaming beneath the sharp Maryland sunlight. Every chin was lifted, every stance unwavering, discipline in its purest form. Marine One touched down, its engines roaring like a storm. Then silence, the kind that carries weight. The door opened, and Donald Trump descended the steps, his overcoat tugged by the wind. The press surged forward, cameras clicking in relentless rhythm. But Trump's eyes weren't on them. They were on the cadets. He walked slowly along the front line, hands clasped behind his back. There was no familiar swagger, no showmanship, just an unspoken gravity in his gaze. A young cadet, barely 20, lifted his trembling hand for a salute. Trump stopped. The world seemed to pause with him. He returned the salute, slowly, deliberately, his eyes lingering on the young man's face. For that brief moment, the noise, the politics, the spotlight, all faded away. It wasn't about authority or power anymore. It was about something simpler, something sacred, the unbroken thread of service that connected them. And as Trump moved down the line, each step quieter than the last, the atmosphere shifted from ceremony to reverence. It was no longer a presidential visit. It was an encounter with the soul of America itself. The sound of footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor as Trump entered the Hall of Honor. The air inside was still, reverent, almost sacred. Tall banners hung from the ceiling, each bearing the crest of a graduating class, each one representing a generation that had served, and in too many cases, sacrificed. Trump's aides stayed close, murmuring quietly about schedules, photo opportunities, and speech notes, but his attention drifted elsewhere. His eyes swept the room. The rows of portraits, the bronze plaques engraved with names, the framed letters written in neat, youthful handwriting. He paused before one plaque. The inscription read, "Lieutenant Aaron Mitchell, class of 2012, gave his life shielding his unit during an ambush overseas." Beneath the name was a photograph, a young man smiling with a quiet confidence. Trump's expression softened. "How old was he?" Trump asked quietly. The guide hesitated, lowering his voice. 23, sir." Trump stared at the image longer than anyone expected. For a man known for his quick remarks, he said nothing. His reflection shimmered faintly on the polished glass. A commander-in-chief looking into the eyes of someone who had given everything for the title he carried. The cameras behind him went silent. Even the aides stopped whispering. All that remained was the rhythmic sound of Trump's slow footsteps moving down the hall, each one echoing heavier than the last. In that quiet space, something shifted, not in the room, but within him. The weight of command, so often political, suddenly felt personal. The auditorium was filled wall to wall. Cadets seated in perfect rows, instructors standing at the back, flags rippling gently above the stage. The cameras were ready, teleprompters glowing faintly with the words of a meticulously prepared speech on defense, duty, and American might. The staff waited for Trump to deliver it with his usual bravado. He stepped up to the podium, the crowd rising in unison. Thank you very much," he began, the familiar rhythm of confidence in his tone. But then, as his eyes swept across the hall, row after row of young faces, each one marked with focus, discipline, and quiet pride, something in him shifted. He looked down at the stack of papers in front of him, then slowly folded them, setting them aside. The room stirred. "I came here to speak," he said, his voice lower now, measured. "But I think I'd rather listen." A quiet ripple spread across the cadets. Surprise, curiosity, disbelief. He paused, scanning the crowd again, as if trying to read their hearts. "You remind me what this country still is," he continued, his voice thickening slightly. "Proud, young, fearless. You make me believe all over again in what we're fighting for." There was no teleprompter now, no rehearsal. Only words drawn from a place beyond politics, from the gut, from something real. For once, Trump didn't fill the silence. He let it breathe. And in that stillness, every cadet in the room leaned forward, sensing that something unscripted, something true, was unfolding right before them. The room was still charged from Trump's unscripted words. The cadets remained silent, not out of formality, but out of something deeper, almost reverent. Then, from the third row, a young female cadet slowly raised her hand. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed a flicker of nerves. "Mr. President," she began, "what does serving mean to you?" A murmur spread through the hall. It wasn't a question on the approved list. Cameras tilted toward her. Advisors stiffened. For a moment, Trump froze, the kind of pause that carried weight, not confusion. His gaze met hers, and the usual sharpness in his expression softened. He took a breath. "Serving," he said quietly, "means remembering who you're serving. Not yourself, not power, not the headlines, but the people who believe in you, who trust that you'll do what's right, even when no one's watching." His voice wavered, just slightly. "And sometimes," he added, "it means admitting that they're the ones who give you strength, not the other way around." The hall was utterly silent. The young cadet swallowed hard, nodding as her eyes shimmered. Trump cleared his throat and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod in return, an unspoken acknowledgement between leader and future soldier. It lasted only seconds, but the moment felt larger than the speech itself. Fragile, human, and unforgettable. The ceremony had ended, the applause faded, and the crowd slowly dispersed into the Maryland afternoon. Staffers expected Trump to head straight to Marine One, but instead, he turned to a nearby officer and asked quietly, "Can I see where they live?" The request stunned everyone. The Secret Service hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances, but Trump's tone left little room for debate. Moments later, he was escorted through narrow corridors lined with photographs, flags, and scuffed doors marked with room numbers. Inside the barracks, the air was thick with the scent of polish, detergent, and discipline. The beds were made with surgical precision. Boots, worn and faded, were stacked neatly beneath them. Trump paused by one bunk, picking up a small, tattered Bible resting on a nightstand. He turned it in his hands and murmured, almost to himself, "These are the real Americans." A sound startled him. The door creaked open. A young cadet entered, freezing mid-step when he saw the president standing there. "Relax," Trump said softly, offering a faint smile. "What's your name?" "Cadet Brooks, sir." Trump nodded, gesturing for him to come closer. "Tell me something, Brooks. You like it here? It's not easy, is it?" The cadet hesitated, then smiled. "No, sir, but it's worth it." Trump studied him, his voice lowering. "Your parents must be proud." "They are, sir," the cadet replied, his tone filled with quiet conviction. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain began to patter gently against the window, the sound steady and calming. There were no cameras, no teleprompters, no applause, just two people generations apart, connected by the same invisible thread of duty. When Trump finally stepped back into the hallway, his expression had changed. It wasn't the face of a politician leaving an event. It was the look of a man who had been reminded of something he didn't want to forget. The sky had turned a pale silver, clouds gathering as Marine One's rotors began to spin in the distance. The cadets assembled one final time on the parade grounds, rows of white uniforms gleaming against the darkening sky. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation, a mix of pride and disbelief at what they had just witnessed inside the academy walls. Trump emerged from the main building, flanked by Secret Service agents, his coat buttoned against the rising wind. Cameras clicked furiously as he approached the cadets. Traditionally, this was the moment the officers saluted first, a symbol of deference to the commander-in-chief. Everyone waited for the familiar gesture. But then, something unexpected happened. Trump stopped, straightened his shoulders, and raised his right hand. First, the gesture froze the field. Even the Secret Service agents seemed momentarily stunned. The salute was crisp, deliberate, and unwavering. Not performed, but offered. One by one, cadets across the line began returning it, their movements precise yet trembling with emotion. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the helicopter, blades slicing through the heavy air. Some cadets blinked rapidly, holding back tears. Others stood taller, as if understanding in that instant what true respect looked like. A whisper carried through the ranks. "He saluted us first." Trump held the salute for several seconds before lowering his hand, giving a small nod. Then, without a word, he turned toward Marine One. As he ascended the steps, he paused and looked back. Not as a politician, not even as a president, but as a man acknowledging the future of the nation he once led. The engines roared to life. The helicopter lifted off, sending ripples of wind across the parade field. The cadets stood unmoving, their salutes held high until the aircraft disappeared into the clouds. On that field, amid the silence that followed, a new kind of respect, quiet, unspoken, enduring, took root. The evening had settled over Washington, D.C., a soft glow spilling from the city streets into the quiet of the presidential quarters. The world outside continued its endless hum, but inside, Trump sat alone, the weight of the day pressing gently against him. He replayed each moment in his mind. The disciplined faces of the cadets, the portraits in the Hall of Honor, the unexpected question that had pierced through his usual defenses. Every scene lingered, sharper and more vivid than any briefing or press clip could capture. On his desk lay a small, folded note. A cadet had slipped it into his hand during the visit. Unfolding it carefully, he read the words, "Thank you for seeing us." He set it beside a small American flag, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. For once, there were no cameras, no reporters, no applause, just stillness, just reflection. He leaned back in his chair, eyes on the distant lights of the Capitol, letting the quiet sink in. The day had been scripted in ways he had not expected, but its impact was real, human, and lasting. In that silence, the enormity of service, respect, and connection settled over him like a steady hand on the shoulder, reminding him what truly mattered. The story begins with ceremony and distance, the powerful figure versus the disciplined cadets. As the visit unfolds, the tone softens from awe to introspection, leading to genuine human connection. Each scene strips away a layer of formality until only humility and shared purpose remain. The emotional peak arrives with Trump's spontaneous salute, a symbol of reversed hierarchy and mutual respect. The story closes on a reflective note, allowing the audience to feel both inspired and grounded. Through this transformation, the narrative redefines strength, not as dominance but as empathy and honor.